Here are the top stories for today, March 15, 2021. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque tests positive for COVID-19. Manila locks down 6 more of its barangays for 4 days amid the spread of COVID-19. Over 2,000 healthcare workers in Bacolod City received their first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. And over 600 athletes make up the Philippines delegation to the 2021 Southeast Asian Games. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque reveals he tested positive for COVID-19. Roque said he earlier tested negative for COVID-19 last March 10 as a prerequisite for their cabinet meeting with President Duterte. However, his RT-PCR test this morning reveals otherwise.
As of 11:29 this morning, nakuha ko po ang resulta na positibo po ako para sa COVID. Now, ang mabuting balita naman po sa akin, lahat ng mga nagkaroon ng close contact sa akin po, yung aking mga dalawang huling test ay noong March 10, negatibo po tayo. No? Itong March 10 po, nag-test tayo dahil nga po sasama tayo kay Presidente sa Dumaguete, kinabukasan 11, so negative po tayo noong March 10. Pero itong test po na kung saan tayo nagpositibo, ito po ay kahapon lamang para nga po sana ngayon para sa pagpupulong kay Presidente mamaya at dito po lumabas na tayo ay positibo.
Meanwhile, 2 higher-ranking officials also tested positive for the disease. These are PDEA Director General Wilkins Villanueva and PNP Chief General Debold Sinas. Pasig City Mayor Vico Soto is currently isolated after his driver, Vener, reportedly died from COVID-19 on Saturday. The youthful mayor canceled his appointments but stressed that he will continue to work online. More policemen are deployed in Manila to enforce the unified curfew hours from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. starting today. PNP officer in charge Lieutenant General Guillermo Eleazar said this is to address the spike in COVID-19 cases. Eleazar said police augmentation forces come from the Highway Patrol Group, the Reactionary Standby Support Force, and other units that have been directed before to conduct red teaming operations. The unified curfew hours is being implemented until the end of the month. Eleazar said the strong police visibility in Metro Manila is anchored on the tried and tested formula which was implemented in Metro Manila and Cebu City last year. Eleazar reminded PNP personnel to observe maximum tolerance. Exempted from the implementation of the curfew hours are medical frontliners, drivers and vendors of essential goods and services, those who are seeking emergency medical assistance, construction workers, media practitioners, call center employees, drivers of shuttle services, members of law enforcement agencies, security guards, and fast food staff and crew. The government has been relentless in acquiring COVID-19 vaccines to ensure that the country will have a fair share of the doses. This is according to National Task Force Against COVID-19 Chief Implementer Carlito Galvez Jr. as he assures that the bulk of COVID-19 vaccines will arrive in the second quarter this year. Galvez said the country has secured enough funding from the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to cover the entire 62 billion pesos for COVID-19 response. The country's initial rollout of its COVID-19 vaccination program began on March 1, following the arrival of 600,000 doses of Sinovac vaccines, immediately followed by 525,400 doses of AstraZeneca. 90% of the vaccines have been deployed in the various parts of the country. Communications Secretary Martin Andanar urged the Filipino people to continue supporting the vaccination program of the government. He said this will help the country achieve herd immunity before the end of the year.
Sa pagdating ng mga bakuna, matatanaw na ang katapusan sa krisis na dala ng COVID. Hinahatid na ang mga bakuna sa mga frontliners sa buong kapuluan, sa mga hindi pa matuturukan agad habang naghihintay. ang ating partisipasyon ay kasing halaga. Patuloy nating sundan ang mga health protocols at suportahan natin ang pamahalaan sa pagkumbinsi sa mga kababayan nating may agam-agam pa sa benepisyo ng pagbabakuna.
Manila, Pasig, and Makati intensify their measures to contain the spread of COVID-19 infections. More on this from Marita Mawahe.
In Manila, 6 more barangays will be placed under a 4-day lockdown starting Wednesday, March 17. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno Domagoso authorized the Manila Barangay Bureau to enforce lockdowns in barangays with 10 or more active COVID-19 cases. These are Barangay 185, which has 11 active COVID-19 cases, Barangay 374, 628, and 847 with 10 cases each, Barangay 521 with 12 cases, and Barangay 675 with 22 cases. Domagoso said these areas will be called critical zones and authorities will implement the strictest quarantine classification in the said areas. In Makati City, Barangay Pio del Pilar is placed under a 3-day localized enhanced community quarantine which started on Saturday and will end tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. Latest report shows that there are 25 confirmed cases and 42 close contact individuals in the area. The city government is conducting house-to-house swab testing to identify and isolate positive patients. In San Juan City, checkpoints are set up all over the city to ensure that everybody complies with the proper health protocols, such as wearing a face mask and face shields and observing social distancing. San Juan Mayor Francis Zamora said they would continue to intensify health measures, such as imposing granular lockdowns to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 infections. The city government also passed an ordinance granting 100,000 pesos to any of the 21 barangays that will record 0 COVID-19 cases in 100 consecutive days. And in Pasig City, the local government is preparing for the possible entry of new COVID-19 variants by establishing a separate quarantine facility. Mayor Vico Soto said they are currently revisiting their healthcare system's protocols to prepare for the possible variants. Soto also orders an indefinite suspension for the reopening of various recreational establishments, as well as intensified patrol and inspection in high-traffic establishments. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muahe.
In Quezon City, liquor ban and other emergency measures are in place to contain the spread of COVID-19. In supplemental guidelines issued by Mayor Joy Belmonte, all residents are mandated to use the QC Pass digital contact tracing app. All gyms, spas, and internet cafes are closed for 2 weeks. Quarantine passes are once again issued to residents, and liquor ban is being re-implemented. Meanwhile, returning overseas Filipinos staying in hotels and other accommodation establishments in the city must report to the Office of the City Administrator for documentation and monitoring. They are also required to complete the 14-day quarantine period regardless of the RT-PCR test result. And in related news, the Quezon City General Hospital implements its teleconsultation services. This as the hospital has already reached its COVID-19 capacity for several days now. QCGH Director Dr. Josephine Sabando, meanwhile, assures that their hospital will still admit non-COVID-19 patients and will prioritize urgent cases such as trauma and cardiac emergencies. Still to come, the Department of Transportation tells public transport operators and drivers to disinfect their vehicles seriously. Over 2,000 healthcare workers in Bacolod City received their first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Pangalagaan ng sarili laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Hanggat maaari, umiwas sa mataong lugar. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong at bibig, maging malinis sa katawan at ugaliin ang wastong paghuhugas ng kamay. Takpan ang ilong at bibig kung uubo o babahing. Umiwas sa mga taong nagpapakita ng sintomas ng coronavirus disease gaya ng lagnat, ubo at sipon. Magsuot ng face mask kung kinakailangan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
All operators and drivers of public transport vehicles are urged to be serious and extra diligent in the disinfection of their vehicles. Transportation Secretary Arthur Tugade said this is to ensure that commuters are safe from COVID-19. Tugade made the appeal after a recent viral video uploaded on Facebook showed how two cleaning staffers of the MRT3 were shown to be hastily and playfully disinfecting one of the line's trains. The staffers involved are now facing disciplinary action. The Presidential Task Force on Media Security has acknowledged UNESCO's recognition of the Philippines' progress in protecting journalists. UNESCO's 2020 Director General report on the safety of journalists and the danger of impunity showed that significant progress was made by the country in the case of the resolution of the 2009 Maguindanao massacre. Presidential Communications Operations Office Secretary Martin Andanar said the UNESCO report is a validation of the Duterte administration's efforts to uphold press freedom in the country. PT-FOM's Executive Director Undersecretary Joel C. Egco also noted that the Philippines was among the countries which have strengthened monitoring mechanisms to track attacks against journalists. President Rodrigo Duterte created PT-FOMs to establish an interagency task force that will provide a safe environment for media workers. The Philippines is believed to be the first country in the world to establish a government body devoted exclusively to media security. The Philippine National Police has ordered the Calbayog City Police Station in Samar to stop issuing statements or commenting on the death of Calbayog Mayor Rolando Aquino while an investigation is ongoing. This as the PNP reshuffled the city's police officials following the controversies they are facing. PNP officer in charge Lieutenant General Guillermo Eleazar ordered the relief of Police Chief Neil Montaño effective Sunday in connection with a shootout between police and Aquino's men, which killed the mayor and 5 others. Eleazar also said the 9 non-commissioned officers were sent to the Samar Provincial Police Office to undergo refresher training. Eleazar called on all interested parties in Aquino's case to wait for the results of the investigation. Meanwhile, Intelligence Chief Lieutenant Fernando Calabria Jr. was sacked for requesting the local court for a list of lawyers representing individuals who are identified with the communist movement. Eleazar apologized on behalf of the PNP, adding that they do not tolerate such an unprofessional method of information gathering. More healthcare workers in the provinces have availed of vaccines against COVID-19 since last week, with no side effects reported among those inoculated so far. More on this from Laid Cabagani.
Over 2,300 healthcare workers from 7 hospitals in Bacolod City have been inoculated with the Sinovac vaccines against COVID-19 as of Sunday. Data from the City Health Office showed the doses were part of the 2,350 vials allocated for those who signified intention to avail of CoronaVac. Dr. Edwin Miraflor, officer in charge of the CHO, said they expect to use all the allocated doses by Sunday afternoon. Bacolod was the first to roll out the CoronaVac in Western Visayas just hours after the vaccines arrived on March 5. Meanwhile, at least 85% of workers of the Bataan General Hospital and Medical Center who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 have not manifested any adverse side effects. BGHMC COVID point person Dr. Noel Laksamana said on Friday they have inoculated 1,138 of the targeted 1,342 BGHMC workers. Laksamana said after BGHMC, they started administering vaccines to workers from the J.C. Pamuyo Memorial District Hospital in Dinalupihan and the Mariveles District Hospital, both as second vaccination priority hospitals in the province. He said the targeted for vaccination are 288 workers from J.C. Pamuyo and 204 from MDH. In Ilocos Norte, the 63-year-old administrator of the Lawag City General Hospital, Dr. Eleazar John Asuncion, encouraged everyone to avail of the COVID-19 vaccine. Asuncion was the first recipient of the vaccine in Ilocos Norte on Friday. He said he took the vaccine for the safety of his colleagues, family, and friends. Asuncion said he believes the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the side effects. To date, almost 50% or a total of 933 healthcare workers in public and private hospitals have been vaccinated in Ilocos Norte. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Lid Kabagani.
Labor groups praised the Department of Labor and Employment for its advisory against the no vaccine, no work policy being planned by some employers. The associated labor unions expressed relief that DOLE is supporting workers. ALU spokesperson Alan Tanhusay said employees are grateful for the prompt positive reaction from the Labor Department. Tanhusay believed the advisory will also influence the ongoing no job debates that have been stoking industrial strife between workers and employers in the United States and in Europe. On Friday, DOLE Secretary Silvestre Rebello III issued an advisory saying vaccination should not be made mandatory and those who refuse to be vaccinated should not be discriminated against. Up next, the AFP and CHR sign an agreement to advance human rights education and advocacy. And over 600 athletes make up the Philippines delegation to the 2021 Southeast Asian Games. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang mga dapat gawin sa lugar ng trabaho laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ang mga kumpanya ay dapat magbigay ng face mask sa kanilang mga empleyado. Bukod dito, magbigay kaalaman din patungkol sa COVID-19. Siguraduhin malinis ang kapaligiran. Maglagay ng sabon at hand sanitizer sa mga palikuran. Siguraduhin ligtas at nalutong maigi ang mga pagkain sa kantina. Obserbahan ang kalusugan ng mga empleyado at katrabaho. Kung sakali man na mayroon silang sintomas ng coronavirus disease, gaya ng lagnat, ubot sipon at hirap sa paghinga, ay agad ipasuri sa doktor. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. Residents of Palawan voted on Saturday in the plebiscite that will determine whether or not the province would be divided into 3 separate local government units. Voters flocked to Palawan's 472 polling places that opened at 7 a.m. despite rainy weather in some areas. Commission on Election spokesperson James Jimenez said most of the polling places opened on time except for the island town of Kalayaan, which is located in the West Philippine Sea and where the delivery of plebiscite paraphernalia was delayed due to rough weather. The province has over 490,000 registered voters in 23 municipalities. Jimenez also assured that health protocols against COVID-19 were practiced during the plebiscite. He meanwhile reported that certain barangay officials refused to give health declaration forms to some voters. On Sunday, the Provincial Board of Canvassers reconvened for the official counting of votes for the plebiscite. This after it has received a certificate of canvass from the municipality of Nara. On Saturday, the PBOC initially convened at the Capitol compound in Puerto Princesa City at 6 p.m. However, it did not receive any plebiscite return or certificate of canvass at that time. The poll body said after the PBOC finishes canvassing the municipal certificate of canvass of votes of all the 23 municipalities of Palawan, it shall proclaim the results of the plebiscite. The Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Commission on Human Rights have vowed to work together in advancing human rights education, training, and advocacy. AFP Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana and CHR Chairperson Jose Luis Martin Gaston signed a memorandum of understanding to create monitoring mechanisms and data sharing of incidents and cases of human rights violations. Both parties shall participate in dialogues and other forms of engagement or cooperation affecting human rights issues. The agreement will remain in full effect for 3 years from the time of its signing. The MOU will reinforce and complement the La Breza Declaration on Human Rights Cooperation issued by the AFP in 2012, which confirmed the continuing commitment of the military to protect human rights. A top army official cited the neutralization of a communist terrorist leader in Nueva Vizcaya as a big blow to the New People's Army. This as the 91st Infantry Battalion reported the death of Romel Tukay, a secretary of the Komiteng Larangang Guerrilla Sierra Madre. Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Reandro Rubio said Tukay died during a gunfight with government troops in Barangay Kimbutan, Dupax del Sur town on Saturday. The NPA front operates in the provinces of Aurora, Nueva Ecija, and parts of Nueva Vizcaya and Quirino. Rubio said the remaining active guerrilla fronts in these areas continue to weaken due to efforts of the government to end local communist armed conflict. Meanwhile, 2 NPA leaders and 5 members surrendered to the 403rd Infantry Brigade in Barangay Manalog, Malaybalay City, Bukidnon. Brigadier General Ferdinand Barandon, commander of the Army's 403rd Brigade, identified the 2 leaders as Armando Dalunyag, Roland Lagunday. Dalunyag said they left the communist movement because of its failed promises and regretted that even their families' welfare was neglected. Major General Andres Centino, 4th Infantry Division Commander, said the NPA leader's surrender is a response to the call of President Duterte for the remnants of the CPP-NPA to surrender. In his March 5 visit to Cagayan de Oro City, Duterte promised communists that the government will provide all the necessary assistance, such as livelihood, skills training, and housing to those who will return to the government's fold. In our foreign news, the World Health Organization has yet to look into the mutation of the new coronavirus N439K, which was first detected in Indonesia in November 2020. Vaccination spokesperson for Jakarta's Health Ministry, Dr. Siti Nadia Tarmizi, said N439K is actually a single mutation that was found earlier than the British B117 variant. N439K is the same variant of D614G, a mutation in the virus. Tarmizi said N439K could camouflage the production of antibodies. The Health Ministry alleged that there are other variants of the coronavirus in Indonesia. However, WHO has paid special attention only to the new coronavirus from United Kingdom B1351, from South Africa and P1 from Brazil. Tarmisi believes that the WHO will conduct a wider study on the N439K mutation. In sports, over 600 athletes are set to play under the Philippine flag in the 31st Southeast Asian Games scheduled from November 21 to December 2 this year. The Philippine Olympic Committee revised its set number of members of the national team following talks with POC President Bambol Tolentino and the 39 national sports associations that will send representatives to the biennial meet. Tolentino said they came up with a larger delegation with a mindset of defending the country's overall title. The Philippines will bring in a huge group for athletics with 63 players, 38 in the male category and 25 on the distaff side. Meanwhile, only 28 slots have been allotted for football. Tolentino said he looks forward to the PSC's budget deliberation for the SEA Games. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque tests positive for COVID-19. Manila locks down 6 more of its barangays for 4 days amid the spread of COVID-19. Over 2,000 healthcare workers in Bacolod City received their first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. And over 600 athletes make up the Philippines delegation to the 2021 Southeast Asian Games. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day, stay safe, everyone.